Today on Kite Bag Tour, we're going way, way back. Welcome back to Kite Bag Tour, everybody, and welcome back to Skyrider Limited. I am, as always, Jesse. Today, we are going back in history. As we dive into the new year, I wanted to take a look at kites that were from the start of dual line competition. Um, I don't have I have some very early stuff to share with you today. I don't have some of the earliest, but I am going to talk a little bit about it here because I feel like it's worth talking about where the first dual line kites really show up. In one of the previous videos, I kind of talked about quad line videos and the origin of quad line being with the Wright brothers. Well, a little further forward in history, uh, a gentleman invented a dual line controlled kite, and it wasn't for sport or recreation or to test an aviation theory, but to be used as a gunnery target for World War II and forward naval gunnery crews. That's the Gerber target kite, and I will find a picture of it right here. And it was very similar in control to a lot of the kites that would come after. A number of diamond shaped dual line kites and things would have very similar bridling configurations and would basically be able to be steered left and right and do some loops, but that was about it. It wasn't until we got into the 80s and the invention of the delta wing sport kites that we really started to see, albeit far more prototypical of what we do now for tricks, but trick flying. While figures were still there, loops and circles and everything. We also started to get square corners and the stall and the slide. And from there, as kites developed, people would start to find other things to do, and thus the axle and other tricks that would follow fades and 540s and flat rotations, and then on into pitch tricks and everything that arrived with the French Revolution. So, we're going to look at some of those early kites from the 80s and on. And we're going to look at one of the kites that actually is probably it's arguably one of the most revolutionary. It's probably one of the most produced kites of its era, and it is a big, big animal. So sit tight, and I'm going to rearrange and get out a Hawaiian team kite. So behind me here is a Hawaiian team kite by Top of the Line Kites. The Hawaiian, along with the Spinoff and the North Shore Radical, were some of the most innovative kites of their time. And Top of the Line was one of the first major producers. There were a number of other mass production-y kite makers at the time, but you got to remember this is the 80s. Top of the Line launched in 1984 with the Hawaiian, and there really was nothing but cottage industry at the time. There's no internet. There's magazine ads and what you saw at kite festivals. And to that end, Don Tabor and company did form Top of the Line Flight Squadron and competed and performed with these kites and the subsequent team kites after. This kite was wildly influential. It's one of the first full size delta wing kites. It's 105 ish inches on the wingspan, all framed in fiberglass, and it also has a really unique innovation at the time. The standoff. Now, Don and Top of the Line didn't invent the standoff. That honor actually goes to Lee Sedgwick, and Lee's pretty cool. You definitely give him a Google. In addition to inventing the standoff, he would become really associated with Revolution kites. He is still known. You can find him at festivals flying a massive stack of Rev 1s, the big full size Revs, as well as his own designed quadline kite that's sort of a disc. I think he calls it a UFO. I don't WIFO. I think it's a WIFO. That's what he calls it. And there are other people that fly it, but nobody flies it like Lee. Find some video of him. If I can, I'll link some in the description. It's so much fun to watch. Lee has also kind of become the bubble guy on the East Coast at festivals. But the story of this kite is really one of bringing team flying to the masses. It's big and it had a presence, and they were loud. They rumbled. This is well before leech lines, and it's made of ripstop, so they kind of rumbled and roared through the sky. And you can imagine when you got a squadron of four of them flying together, a team flying in formation. It was really quite something. There's videos of these kites in formation with Top of the Line, and it really is something. Big elegant formations, very evocative of like the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds, what we always compare team flying to. But this really was precise like that. Um, Not that more modern teams aren't, but we've started to see an incorporation of the individual flying of tricks into team flying. This While that has a lot of action and excitement, this was a very elegant format of team flying. Kite's framed in all fiberglass, uses metal ferrules where there are ferrules, and then plastic tube fittings. The bridle is very heavy duty um, Dacron, and it uses these fishing swivels. All the metal swivels were very, very common in this day and age. These kites also, because they're just massive sails, generate so much pull. I don't know this for fact, but I always heard that Team Top of the Line flew in cleats, soccer cleats or football cleats, to give them better grip, particularly on grass fields, so they didn't slide around as much and could hold on to the kite. So that's the Team Hawaiian. Like I said, big kite. I do really want to get out and fly this one again. This one, as you can see, is really pristine, other than a small patch hole right up here over my shoulder in the red that was patched with ripstop nylon repair tape, probably fairly early on in the kite's career. But other than that, it's as fresh as the day it came out of the package, which is really remarkable considering this kite is pushing 40 years old now. So, you know, like I said, I want to get out and fly it, but it'll be interesting to see what we can get for video and if it's something that's fun enough to share. I hope it will be. Like I said, they're big and loud, but they don't do a lot of tricks. This kite will stall and slide and do a few things like that. I am curious to see if it'll axle. I have a suspicion it will, but it won't be the prettiest axle on the planet. So stay tuned for some flying video with that kite. Next, we're going to go to a contemporary development with a slightly different shape. So anyone familiar with the history of power kiting might recognize this name or a related name, kite ski. This is a Banshee. So this is a Banshee Scimitar, one of the small variety of Banshees. This one just the 6-foot Scimitar. There were a few flavors of Banshee and a few sizes. There was the Scimitar, the Chikara, the Pegasus, and then the Kite Ski kites, which are a related development I'll talk about in just a moment here. This was a cambered wing dual line kite and used some pretty interesting construction methods. Here we have an outboard batten, as well as here, and here. These are all fiberglass out here. This one is steamed wood, and it has a small amount of camber to it here. The main spine is an aluminum, mandrel bent aluminum tube that gives the kite its overall curvature there, which you can actually see. The kite does have an airfoil curve to it. It's Well, the first thing about this kite is they are brutally hard to put together. This is one sprung piece of fiberglass with so in the smallest kite, in the 4-footer, it's actually one piece. This one, I take it back, has 2 ferrules in it, but it joins and then becomes one piece. And it goes into an end pocket here to camber the kite, which is quite the workout to do, to be honest. Another kite from the early to mid 80s. I think these came out in 84 or 6. And again, because we were in the era of cottage industry and pre the internet, there was a lot less limitation on your imagination unless you were working in collaboration with someone, which could either fuel your imagination or maybe limit it. And so, while there is a pocket of kites around that San Diego area that all end up looking like the Team Hawaiian, kites from elsewhere around the country start to take on very interesting shapes, like this Banshee and like the Cyborg we saw in an earlier video. These are a great deal of fun to fly. Again, big and precise. The other sizes, there was a 10-footer, and then the Pegasus, which was a power kite, and the kite ski kites were actually 16 and 20 feet. You can imagine how big that kite is. Those kites were an interesting deal. The guy behind these kites came up with the idea to use the large ones as power kites for kite skiing and early kite surfing. And he partnered with somebody to promote it. Who, my understanding is, that relationship went sour, and sort of the end legacy of Banshee was a protracted legal battle over the name of the kites and the concepts of the sport, which is really unfortunate. But it also heralded in some of the earliest power kiting, and so we do have this kite to thank for that. While this kite is a fully framed kite, you can actually see when the wing loads a lot in common with some of the shapes that would be produced when we got to the inflatable kites that kite surfing uses today. While those are more rounded, they have that blade shape. And as we saw in the last kite bag tour, when Fraze showed us his flexifoil blades, flexifoil started with a cupped shaped kite with a single stick that we'll see in a future video, also in a similar time and also in a similar concept of big turns as a sport kite scaling up to a power kite. Um, so that's the Banshee there. Now, the family has a history with Banshee. One of my first kites was one of the baby Banshees, little one in raspberry, the size below this. Um, but my dad, along with his original teammates, Gary and Maggie Engvall, Eric Babilowitz, um, Wayne, whose last name I can never remember, and John Lind, flew as Air Atlantis as well, before I started flying pairs with my dad under that name, and they flew Banshees as their team kite in dual line demonstrations. So they flew. They had this size, the 6-footers. They also had tens that they would fly in formation in up to 6 kite formation, and performed with those for a number of years in the early 90s, late 80s. So again, Banshee here was another one of these sort of early kite shapes. We've been looking at stuff for for these two kites from. So again, the Banshee here was another one of these early team kites, early stunt kites, uh, part of that great 80s, revolution. The next kite we're going to look at is later 80s into the 90s designer, and a gentleman from closer to home here on the East Coast. Behind me here on the couch is another kite from the early 90s. This one would be from about 1991. This is a Marty dart by a local designer, Marty Sasaki. Marty passed away a few years ago, and we saw one of his other kites, which we'll actually see again here in a few minutes, in the special episode right before Kite Party last year. But this is one of his earliest. It's a full size. Really interesting kite. A lot of very familiar features on this kite to more modern sport kites. The frame is an interesting mix of a one-piece fiberglass spine, protruded upper spreader, and then some very early G-force Avia lower spreaders and leading edge. The standoffs are particularly interesting. This is a yellow fiberglass, but it's capped with a larger piece of fiberglass and loops around to go into an upward facing standoff connector. The center tee is also an interesting construction. It's a carbon ferrule here that meets the via tubes with a couple pieces of rubber tubing and then a cord tee that keeps it attached to the spine, allowing it to rotate for easier packaging and also to give the kite some shock absorption. Some really early APA fittings on this kite as well make it a very interesting mix. Marty was always an early adopter of technology. He was an engineer by trade, and also played with ultralight indoor model gliders, Mylar and balsa wood ultralights, and things like that. Always interested in the science of it, and always developing. The kite is gorgeous in this rainbow and black ripstop. It was made for my dad. It mirrors the Air Atlantis team colors of black and rainbow. Um, and just a beautiful example of really early 90s sport kite. Starting to see shape more evocative of things like the MEFM and the North Shore Radical, with this tail single standoff, but again a massive wingspan. You can kind of see here. I'll stand up with it, and you can really see just how big this kite is. It just vanishes off the screen here. Um, Also, just beautifully constructed. All of Marty's seams are rolled and really nicely finished and stitched. Again, cottage industry, Marty working to stay right on the leading edge of everything that was going on in kites at the time. And so we see some interesting mixes of material for such an early sport kite. Another one that I'm hoping to get out and fly soon, this along with my high flyers, my Benson Phantom, but mine's a high flyers example. Are some of the early kites that really pique my interest to go out and fly and put on video for you guys. I really want to see what they'll do. These early kites with standoffs and whatnot. We weren't thinking about tricks with them, but we were thinking about the progression of the sport with them, and it'd be interesting to revisit those kites with a 30 years further along eye and perspective and see just what they're really about today. Behind me is a kite that should be familiar to viewers of the channel and one that isn't. Both of these kites are also designed by Marty Sasaki. On my left, your right, we have the Katana, and on this side, we have the Katana 2. Both of these kites are some of my favorites. The Katana is an all ripstop, again with an Avia G-force frame and pultruded carbon. Some interesting notes on this kite are the proto batons here at the outer and the standoffs, which are all pultruded carbon as well, and again with the cord T here. Great kite, little smaller, very precise. It was built as an intermediate and advanced dual line kite and really targeted at individual competitors. Uh, Next to it, the Katana 2, which again we've seen before, with this wonderful giant winglet, and again with the batten there. That batten is also protruded carbon. This frame, however, shifts to Sky Shark, and we get our first hard rubber tee from Marty. Both of these kites are so much fun. I have a little bit of video of Devin from Canvas playing with this kite at Kite Party last year that I'll drop in after this segment so you guys can see this one in flight. But I'm hoping to get them both out again real soon and play with those as well. Um, some other interesting things is the shift from internal ferrule with the via tubes and with the reinforced G-force ends to the Sky Shark with an external ferrule with the external brass. He also shifts here from a mix of vinyl tubing and APAs over to all molded fittings here. I think these are early Easton fittings, but I'm not 100% on that. This also is his first Icarus kite. Unfortunately, the Reuben in this kite has bled and stained some of the white panels. So it's not as pristine as it once was, but it's still absolutely gorgeous. I had this kite with me at Kite Party last year, and to my great joy, John Chalacy had a Katana of his with him. John, I found out, knew Marty pretty well, and at the previous Kite Party, shared with me, and I got to fly one of Marty's prototypes for what would have been the third version of the Katana. And that kite, I think, did come out with distribution through Into the Wind for a little while. But the prototype I flew was for a variable vent version of the kite. There was a fourth Katana that came out after this and before the later one called the California Katana. I don't have an example of that one. And unfortunately, Marty because of when he was producing kites, finding examples of Marty's work online is pretty hard. So I don't think I'll be able to turn up a picture for you guys, but I will give it a shot. Um, the kites were wonderful. This kite, when Devin flew it at Kite Party, proved remarkably capable. I was frankly a little timid of pushing it. Devin had no qualms about it and really put it through its paces beautifully. And what we found was that it is incredibly capable and still so wonderful to watch in flight. Very, very precise and sharp. And this kite was no different. This is one of four of these that we have. I also have my dad's 3-pack stack of these kites, which is pretty cool. I've actually flown a couple of performances with the stack. They're in red, yellow, and black kind of German flag scheme, and I was actually able to axle that whole stack, which was pretty cool. Another set of kites I'm hoping to have out real soon again. Diving through the basement today turned up a whole bunch of kites that I knew we had but hadn't looked at in a while, and instantly went, oh well, I want to fly that. Which leads us to the last kite for today. And one thing you may have noticed about me is I do love a good winglet and a good batten. So the next kite's going to keep that theme going as well.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to do for you and now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to do for you a medley. For your approval, ladies and gentlemen, for your enjoyment.
So behind me here is our last kites for today. These are kites that we have actually seen very recently. Not these two specific ones, but this model. In the 1 year video, Tori showed us his Prism Eclipse. Well, this is mine and my dad's. These are Prism Eclipse Super Ultralights. Both of them are from 1994. So Prism is a really cool story. I would argue that Prism is, if not the most successful and largest, then one of the largest and most successful kite manufacturers of all time. They have done some pretty impressive things in terms of reach, both producing kites at the boutique level, found in kite stores and on competition fields, and entry level kites that can be found on Amazon and in Target and in REI. It's really cool what Mark and company have done. So Mark Reed and a friend of his started Prism in 1992. The first kite was the Radian, which is a real high aspect ratio wing with a lot of battens. I'll put a picture up here. Um, Super cool kite, very tricky to fly. But to the table, Mark and company brought a bunch of innovations that hadn't really been seen yet in kites. They were coming from a background in sailing, and to the table they brought expanded uses of spectra, higher performing sail materials, mylar. One of the signatures of Prism kites would be mylar. Um, and no better example of that than at the 30th anniversary, we saw the Synthesis SE, the Synthesis Special Edition that came out. There was a raffle. There were 30 or 36 kites. I forget exactly how many there were. I think it was six colors, five kites each, so 30. Uh, and everybody put in a raffle, and they raffled off, and then some lucky people got their name picked to buy one. And then this past year, they reversed the mylar ratio between the SE and the mass production version of the synthesis. And so there is a now mass production synthesis that came out this past fall that everybody can buy. Really cool kite, shows a lot of lineage of Prism design. Really enjoyable to fly. Bit of an old school flyer, but I got to fly one of the first production kites at Long Beach Island this past October, and really enjoyable. But enough about that, and more about this kite. So these kites are part of the first 50 of the Prism Eclipse. This is number 27 and 38 respectively. They are so the deal here is they're both from 1994. My dad and I were at Newport for the Kite Festival in Newport, Rhode Island, and Mark Reed from Prism had come to Newport, and he had brought with him a selection of these eclipses, and so we got these from Mark at Newport in 1994, which, to my knowledge, was the first year of the eclipse. There have been so with this eclipse, there was the SUL, a standard, an event. I don't think there was an actual UL. And then the total eclipse, the larger one, which you can distinguish by an extra panel through here. And then there was an E2 or an Eclipse 2 and an E3 later on. All of those kites have passed out of production, but hopefully someday we'll see an E4, a fourth generation Eclipse. That would be a really exciting development from the folks at Prism for sure. These kites got flown a little, but not a ton. They've been pretty gently loved. Not long after we got them, we would become sponsored by Buena Vista, and so we sort of had to shelve them, but they sat quietly in their bags. And other than a couple of fittings being replaced recently by me in a preparation to hopefully put them back in the air, they're almost entirely original from 1994. Again, in a via frame on these, all Icaric sail. One of the interesting things about the early Icarics, if you look here at the pattern, I'm going to bring this one closer to the camera. If you look carefully at the pattern in the Icarics, you can see that while current Icarics has a square pattern to it, the grain of this fabric is actually more rectangular, more elongated, making the grain direction and stretch direction of the fabric a little more obvious. Um, Other interesting points on this kite is the mylar trailing edge and reinforcements at the standoffs, excuse me, and of course this wonderful winglet and batten here. I've said it and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it. I love winglet. I think kites with winglets slide better. Have more stability in the slide. In general, the winglet also expands your wind window. So I really like a winglet. I love how it looks. I love how it flies. I wish more kites had winglets. There, I said it. Some other like very 1990s stuff. That upper center tee as well, supporting the upper spreader. Um, but a really wonderful ultralight and some really, really spectacular construction on this kite. I'm going to put this in the air. I'm going to fly them for sure. Um, so look for that soon. So the Prism Eclipses, again, super cool kite, revolutionary, really one of the first like really capable all around ballet and trick kites, I would say. Not a freestyle kite, but a proper ballet kite capable of flying figures as well as it was tricks. Um, yeah, super cool. And I love that the pair has stayed together. They're a really nice matched pair in terms of colors. Um, this one with the charcoal purple and teal, and here I'm actually not sure if that's teal or green. That might be one of the greens. I'm pretty sure it's teal though. And this one in the purple, black, and teal. Um, so thank you for watching and for strolling through these early sport kites with me. I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed having them out and just getting to see them again, like meeting old friends once again. As always, thank you so much for watching, subscribing, sharing, following, liking, and we will see you out there, Skyrider.